a massive blow to the House GOP last year, George Santos was expelled after being hit with a slew of federal charges. His controversial exit left an open seat that Democrats were ready to take. After pouring $13 million into the New York special election, Democrats came out on top.
Despite the dirty tricks, despite the vaunted Nassau County Republican machine, we won.
Now, the race had many implications for the House, shifting the balance of power to the Democrats, now with the 213 seats to the GOP's 219. Both parties used the special election to test how voters reacted to their border messaging and foreign funding going into the presidential election. It's time to go on the record with Scott Tranter, Director of Data Science from Decision Desk HQ. Scott, thanks for joining us from a chilly D.C. Rooftop this time.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me.
Well, Scott, just to start off, Democrats obviously scored this major victory in New York, a huge blow to House Republicans. Mike Johnson says this is in no way a bellwether in the election. Is he right?
Well, it's interesting. I would say he's partially right. Special elections do not necessarily pretend what's going to happen in the general election. But this is a tough one. This is a seat that the Republicans took from the Democrats 2 years ago. It's a Biden +7 district. Tom Suozzi outperformed the polling. The polling indicated Suozzi was only up 3 to 4, so we thought we were expecting a little closer race. It looks like he's going to win by 7. It does tell us a lot about campaign tactics going into the fall. Republicans tend to vote on Election Day, which is different from the trend over the last 10 years. And because of the snowstorm, we saw a depressed turnout on Election Day, and that certainly hurt Mazi Pilip. And so that's going to be something we look at, going into this fall. Are there big, weather instances or weather things going on in key states like Pennsylvania, Ohio? That's kind of what we learned from this one.
Moving on, the special counsel's report on President Biden's handling of classified documents didn't paint a pretty picture of his mental fitness. Instead, it called into question his recollection of key moments, including the years he was vice president. Now, a new poll shows a majority of Americans think both Biden and Trump are too old to serve. What effect could this have on voter turnout, and does it increase the chances of a third-party bid?
Well, I think what this does is it confirms what a lot of voters' priors are. Their priors are that both candidates are too old, just as the graphic you showed. But it also confirms what a lot of the polling has said about both candidates is they want somebody else, right? So that's what this special counsel's report does. It confirms what everyone's been thinking. It does have an effect on third party, right? Because the average voter doesn't spend a whole lot of time looking and reading and talking about all this. And so if their initial reaction is, hey, my candidate, whether it's Republican or Democrat's too old, let me go and see who else is out there. And so that's where I think you see a no labels or an RFK Jr. or a Cornel West at least looking to latch on and potentially make some noise coming this fall.
So going back to Biden and Trump, what are voters more concerned about, a candidate's age or their mental acuity?
So it's interesting. We've been polling, all the pollsters, including, News Nation, The Hill, have been polling age. There isn't a whole lot on a mental acuity, but I would imagine a lot of the voters look at mental acuity and age as the same thing. They're highly correlated. We're going to see some more polling about that, especially after President Biden very publicly opted not to take a cognitive test in his upcoming health physical, something Donald Trump did. That's certainly not going to help the news cycle. And so I think we're going to see some more polling on mental acuity. But what I do think is a lot of voters are going to look at mental acuity the same way they look at his age. Is, if I think you're too old, then I also think, if you can't appear to be with it or be sharp or be on top of things, we're gonna dock that against you.
So Vice President Kamala Harris's favorability is 40%. She's a heartbeat away from the presidency. Do you think voters see her as an asset or a liability to Biden's reelection bid?
So that's interesting. If we just look at her favorability, right? Democrats support her because she's a Democrat, but not necessarily because they love her as a candidate or a leader. Republicans hate her just on the fact that she's a Democrat. So it's really those independent voters, and that's where her favorability among independents isn't good. Depending on the poll, she's anywhere from upside down in terms of, more unfavorables to right on the edge, 50-50. So, that's different than from a lot of vice presidents in the past. That is where she's going to have to make it up if she's going to take more of a more of a leadership role, and that's not a good thing going into the general for them. You want to see someone like her viewed favorably, certainly among the independents. You know you're not going to win over the Republicans, and you know you've got the Democrats in the bag, but she's going to have to do something about those independent voters who've had 3 to 4 years to look at her and make a judgment and, don't necessarily love her.
I want to talk about the economy now. CPI data suggests that inflation is coming down, but a recent poll shows voters trust Trump more than Biden when it comes to the economy. So what does it say? What does the data say about why Bidenomics is not resonating with voters?
Well, it's interesting. We talk about this a lot, and I think we're going to talk about it pretty much for the next 9 months. All the economic data says the economy is getting better. But you know what most voters are seeing? They're seeing tens of thousands of layoffs in white-collar jobs on the tech sector. Their consumer sentiment is upside down. They don't think the economy is on the right track. It's funny. If we just look anecdotally, my favorite thing is tracking the dollar menu. Both McDonald's and Taco Bell basically said, we're going to retool that because we understand people don't like paying $20 for meals. And I think that's really where the problem is you've got all these economics professors and all these bigwig finance people telling the people that the economy's good, but they're sitting here saying, look, stuff's too expensive, gas is too expensive, et cetera. And that plays directly into what Trump is going to do. Trump is going to say, hey, the economy was good under me. Not going to be real specific about it, but they're going to say, hey, he's going to say, hey, it was good under me. So it's bad under Biden. So if you bring me back, I'm going to make it better. Whether that's true or not is a different question, but that's the message that's going to resonate. And we can see that in the polling. We can see that by voters saying, yeah, we trust Donald Trump. The economy was better under you, or at least we perceived it to be better. And so that's what we're seeing in the polling.
That's a good point you bring up about the dollar menu. It's been a few years or a while since I've seen fast food chains advertise that. Very interesting. Moving on, in a three-way matchup, Decision Desk has Robert F. Kennedy Jr. snagging 8% of the vote as he continues to fight for ballot access. Do you think RFK Jr. helps or hurts Biden?
Look, this initial average, and we're going to start tracking this, and we're going to start tracking it at the state level because that's where it really matters. It appears that he's pulling more from Joe Biden. And that's logical, especially at this stage, just because he's got, a lot of name ID in the Democratic Party. And so initially, everyone, before they get into him and look at some of his policy positions and look at what he's saying, like, okay, Kennedy seems okay, seems new, especially when you combine it with the fact that poll that you showed earlier that the majority of Democrats think Joe Biden's too old. This makes sense. When we get down to it and we start looking at the state level stuff in a couple of months, I think we're going to see that RFK has some positions that's going to allow him to take some voters from Donald Trump as well. He's definitely positioned to be a spoiler if, and that's a big if, he can get on the ballot in states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, Florida.
Yeah, and that's interesting because we've heard Trump really up his rhetoric against RFK. The RNC certainly isn't happy with RFK, or they've at least expressed that. I know you said you're going to dig into the state level going forward, but where do you think RFK Jr. could help Trump? I know you mentioned Pennsylvania, but what are some of the other places?
I think Pennsylvania and Michigan and Wisconsin are the three states to look at, just simply based on RFK. Some of RFK's policy positions are populist and libertarian leaning and appeal to some of the more blue collar voters, especially on the union side, and some on the fringe vaccine, get the government out of my school type area. Obviously, that would hurt Trump a little bit too, but those are the types of voters that generally the Democrats have counted on in their coalition to win in states like Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania.
On a lighter note, do you think Biden is trying to downplay his age by launching a TikTok account? I know he did that on Super Bowl Sunday, made some headlines.
Yeah, no, the TikTok campaign and the tweet about with him in the red eyes after the Kansas City Chiefs win, he's certainly trying to go after that Gen Z voter. What's interesting to me, we're going to see some polling, is if that resonates, right? One thing we've learned about polling Gen Z is they are different from millennials, which I am, or Gen X, which some other people are, is they can smell inauthenticity. And, that message didn't speak to me, but I'm not sure it spoke to them. And we'll see if any of this stuff works, especially when, there's a lot of national security and issues around TikTok and things like that. We'll see if the Republicans pounce on that and try and, every voter they lose on the youth side, they pick one up in the 55 plus side. And that's a big issue among people who vote at a higher rate than those younger people. So it's an interesting strategy. We'll see if it pays off.
Yeah, it's all about meeting voters where they are, but Biden getting some bipartisan pushback against that TikTok account. Very interesting. Scott Tranter, as always, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Moving on to Trump's legal troubles, a recent News Nation Decision Desk HQ survey found 57% support disqualifying Trump from the ballot if he is convicted in one or more of his criminal cases. Unsurprisingly, this breaks along partisan lines, with only 29% of Republicans supporting his disqualification compared to 85% of Democrats. With so much at stake, it's no wonder the former president is sparing no cost on his defense. The Hill staff writer Rafael Bernal breaks down the numbers on Trump's legal fees, and the cost is colossal.
So we all know former President Donald Trump is facing 91 criminal charges spread across 4 indictments and a handful of civil lawsuits. The courts are still far from determining whether Mr. Trump is in fact a criminal. But for his lawyers, they're getting paid. Our colleague Zach Schoenfeld and Ella Lee broke down how much each law firm collected in 2023. Florida attorney Chris Kise netted almost $9 million defending Trump. He's the lead trial lawyer on New York Attorney General Letitia James's civil fraud lawsuit against Trump and his businesses, by far the most expensive and financially riskiest of Trump's trials. Coming in second, Clifford Robert at $5.29 million. Robert is also on the New York lawsuit team, mainly defending Trump's adult sons and other parties in the case. Trump has paid California attorney Harmeet Dillon's firm $4.61 million. Dillon's defended Trump against attempts to knock him off the ballot using the 14th Amendment's insurrection ban and in the Stormy Daniels defamation lawsuit. Alina Habba, a lawyer who's almost become a household name, charged $4.03 million through her firm in Trump-related cases. If it seems like Habba is in every courtroom the former president visits, it's because she pretty much is. She's Trump's legal spokeswoman as well as an attorney on an array of cases. So lawyers John Lauro and his associates charged $2.65 million as part of Trump's defense, this time against the federal charges related to January 6th. Defending accusations that Trump allegedly mishandled classified documents has netted Evan Corcoran's firm $2.63 million. But Corcoran probably won't make the 2024 list. He stepped down as Trump's attorney in that case after allegations that Trump misled Corcoran. And then attorney Todd Blanche, he's defending Trump on a variety of criminal cases to the tune of $2.33 million. Blanche left his old law firm to represent Trump, but not before the firm charged $345,000 for related services. And New York trial lawyer Joe Tacopina is another one who won't be on the 2024 books. His firm, though, charged $1.77 million defending Trump in the lawsuit brought against him by writer E. Jean Carroll. And finally, Atlanta defense lawyer Steve Sadow charged $1.52 million after Trump hired him shortly before surrendering to Fulton County authorities in August. Well, you may be asking yourself, how do we know this? Easy. Those payments were all made through political groups, PACs and super PACs and campaigns that have to publicly disclose their spending. And that $34 million figure, well, if you add the odds and ends these groups have spent on Trump's defense, the total adds up closer to $50 million.
That's it for What's America Thinking. Come back next week. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Hill's YouTube channel. And we want to hear from you. Leave your comments and let us know what's on your mind.